blind, have low vision, or another print disability that makes reading, holding a book, or turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org. And hello, your Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service now presents a reading of articles and features from the Buffalo News for Monday, August 17th. Your readers today are
Ted Pajacki.
And I'm Ed Howard. And Ted, we're going to start with the weather.
Okay.
And we're going to have variable cloudiness today with a couple of showers into the early afternoon, and it is going to be humid. The high temperature will be 80. It'll be partly cloudy tonight with a low of 61. Sunny to partly cloudy, pleasant and less humid tomorrow with a high of 78. Wednesday, a couple of showers and a thunderstorm, mainly later in the day. The normal high and low temperature for this date is 79 and 62. Our record high was 92 degrees set in 1935, and our record low was 44 in 1880. And last year on this day, our highs and lows were 88 degrees and 64 degrees. We've had so far about 2 1/3 inches of rain this month. Year to date, we have almost 30 inches of rain, and our normal year to date is almost 24. So we're about 6 inches ahead as far as rainfall this year. And our air quality index is said to be, it's a little closer to moderate. Not so much good, but a little closer to moderate.
Okay. We'll sweat this one out. On our front page today, Terrence Connor's new law firm is sharing legal work for the Diocese of Buffalo with former partners. When attorney Terrence M. Connors broke off from several of his longtime law partners earlier this year, the split raised questions about whether his new firm, Connors Law, would continue to represent the Catholic Diocese of Buffalo. The attorney-client relationship dates all the way back to the early 1990s, when Connors first began representing the diocese in cases in which priests were accused of crimes, including drug possession and child sexual abuse. A federal court filing this week said at least some of the work on behalf of the diocese that was being done by Connors' prior firm, Connors LLP, will not move to Connors Law. The name of Connors LLP was changed to Roach, Quinlan, Grable, McCory, Romano, and Kretsch LLP, after Connors and 3 other Connors LLP attorneys left and started Connors Law, with offices along the Buffalo River on Ohio Street. The Roach, Quinlan, Grable firm remains at 424 Main Street in the location where Connors LLP had been for years. A diocese spokesperson declined to comment on what he termed a business reorganization. Connors said nothing has materially changed regarding legal representation for the diocese following the split. We're doing the same stuff we've always done for them, he said. Randall White, a partner at Connors LLP, who joined Connors at Connors Law, handles the review, analysis, and possible litigation of Child Victims Act cases that tangentially involve the diocese and are moving forward in the state courts, according to Connors and Lawler F. Quinlan III, who submitted a declaration on behalf of Roach, Quinlan, Grable, in U.S. Bankruptcy Court for the Western District of New York. Connors said he continues to provide legal counsel to the diocese when it's necessary. In his filing, Quinlan said Roach, Quinlan, Grable no longer handles review and analysis of child victims abuse cases, but was still providing legal representation on newly reported abuse claims, including communications with attorneys for claimants and for accused clergy, as well as with the offices of area district attorneys. Roche, Quinlan Grable also will continue to provide legal assistance regarding the investigation of claims and the work of a volunteer review board that examines claims of abuse or misconduct brought against the clergy, provide occasional legal advice to the diocese on inquiries from the media, government, or parishioners, and assist in the preparation of annual audits required by the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops and the annual surveys for the Center for Applied Research in the Apostolate, which is located at Georgetown University. Quinlan told the Buffalo News that the two firms were splitting work for the diocese as amicably as possible. He also said neither Connors nor the diocese have decided to part ways with each other. Serving as the chief counsel for the diocese was lucrative and prestigious for Connors for many years, and with legal guidance from Connors that in some cases, including the drafting of settlements and non-disclosure agreements, diocese officials were able to keep a lid on most of the abuse complaints for many decades. The veneer that the Buffalo Diocese didn't have the same widespread problem with abusive clergy as had been uncovered in other dioceses and archdioceses began to crack in 2018 when Michael Whalen publicly accused the Reverend Norbert Orsolitz of abusing him, and the priest admitted to the news that he had molested, quote, probably dozens, end quote, of boys in the 1970s and 80s. Within days of Orsolitz's admissions, then Bishop Richard J. Malone announced the creation of a compensation fund for people who had been sexually abused as children. Connors sat beside Malone at a news conference announcing the fund, the terms of which Connors had a hand in drawing up. A flood of abuse accusations against dozens of clergy and other diocese employees followed, triggering federal and state investigations of the diocese. Hundreds of Child Victims Act lawsuits, and ultimately a Chapter 11 bankruptcy filing in 2020 to settle nearly 900 sex abuse claims. The law firm of Bond, Shanick, and King has served as the diocese bankruptcy attorney throughout the Chapter 11's hearings. But Connors LLP continued as special counsel to the diocese, handling legal work related to defending against CVAU lawsuits, as well as any new accusations of abuse or misconduct that would be presented to the review board. Connors LLP earned $2.7 million for the diocese work between the start of bankruptcy in 2020 and March 31st, according to the court records. Quinlan noted in court papers that his firm was charging $250 per hour for partners and $200 per hour for associates, the same reduced rate for its diocese work as in 2020, even as other firms doing legal work raised their rates in recent years. Connors, over the past decade or so, turned over most of the direct legal work he had been doing for the diocese to other lawyers in Connors LLP, which is namely White and Quinlan.
Well, staying on the front page of today's Buffalo News, our next headline is Trump's photo op threatens to hurt GOP in the midterms. 2 years after Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump staged a press conference flanked by grocery staples to spotlight inflation under Democrats, food prices are still rising despite his pledge to bring them down. The gap between the promise and reality now looms as a vulnerability for Republicans ahead of November's midterms. Standing between tables piled high with fruit, beef, cereal, milk, and other household staples at his Bedminster Golf Club on August 15, 2024, Trump blamed the Biden administration for sharp increases in groceries. The spectacle, complete with charts, was aimed at undercutting the Democratic nominee, Kamala Harris, and highlighted Trump's central promise he could tame inflation and lower the cost of living. 2 years later, higher gasoline and grocery prices are squeezing household budgets and turning the cost of living into the top issue for American voters. Voters now give Democrats a slight edge over Republicans, in who they view as better stewards of the economy for the first time in nearly a decade, according to Reuters Ipsos polling. Sheila Carney, a 68-year-old Trump voter, punctuated her frustration with an expletive as she unloaded $70 worth of groceries into her car outside a supermarket not far from Trump's Bedminster Club. The haul was modest: meat, detergent, and a 12-pack of iced tea. For Carney, the receipt was evidence that the affordability concerns Trump has sometimes dismissed as a Democratic hoax remain a daily burden for many Americans. "This is real. He can say it's not, but it is," said Carney, a hospital administration assistant who has delayed retirement. "He hasn't brought anything down." A Reuters analysis of 26 grocery categories tracked by the Bureau of Labor Statistics and featured in Trump's Bedminster display found prices have risen 3.4% in the first 19 months of his second term. That's less than a quarter of the pace recorded at the same point in former President Joe Biden's term, but still falls short of Trump's pledge to lower prices, as surges in coffee, beef, and apples have more than offset declines in items including eggs and butter. A White House official pointed to data on Wednesday that showed U.S. consumer prices barely increased in July from the month before, as evidence that inflation is under control. The July CPI report is further proof that President Trump's long-term agenda is delivering. Prescription drug and auto insurance costs continue to fall, real wages are rising, and beef prices have cooled, while other household essentials like eggs, poultry, and dairy remain low, the official said. As a registered Republican, Carney said high grocery and gasoline prices due to the Iran war were among the reasons she had grown disillusioned enough to consider sitting out the midterms, underscoring recent polling suggesting Republicans are less enthusiastic about voting than Democrats. Carney was one of 17 Republicans and independents Reuters interviewed in New Jersey's 7th congressional district, a battleground that includes Bedminster and where swing voters and turnout could prove decisive. The race pits Republican incumbent Tom Keene against Democrat Rebecca Bennett, who has also sought to capitalize on voters' frustration over the cost of living. More than half of those interviewed said they were either undecided or leaning toward Bennett. While grocery prices weighed heavily on many voters, complaints about Keene more often centered on his months-long disappearance from public view earlier this year, which he later attributed to depression. Their views on the economy mirror those of other Trump supporters Reuters has interviewed in recent months who, despite standing by the president, say financial pressures have dampened their enthusiasm for voting in November. Francesco Trebi, a public policy professor at the University of California, Berkeley, recently co-authored research finding that Trump drew stronger support in the 2024 election in counties where inflation outpaced income growth, eroding households' purchasing power. With real wages rising only marginally and lagging the pace of broader economic growth, Trebi said it is likely that pattern will reverse in November. "I expect the same anti-incumbent shift to happen in 2026, this time possibly weakening Republicans," he said. Presidents have limited influence over inflation, which is driven by a range of factors and more directly addressed by the Federal Reserve. And many Republicans appear willing to give Trump the benefit of the doubt, even as his tariffs and the Iran war have contributed to rising prices. Bonnie Chandler, age 64, plans to vote for Keene, saying she believed some companies were keeping prices elevated to make Trump look bad and that the growing influence of the Democratic Party's progressive faction left her unwilling to consider its candidates. "I'm going to vote Republican. I'm not a woke person. I'm not a communist. I'm not a socialist, she said. Lauren DiGirolamo, a 34-year-old Trump voter, said issues such as education and border security mattered more to her than grocery prices. I feel grocery prices are pretty much at a level with where they were during Biden. I know some of the key things that I look for. Eggs have gone down, she said, adding that she intended to vote for Republican candidates in November.
You are listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier radio reading service, and the time is 15 minutes after the hour. And now it's time for us to turn to the opinion section of the news, and we start with the Buffalo News editorial, and the headline is Culinary Pride. And this editorial is about Buffalo's food scene, even without Michelin, that is garnering national notice. Self-validation. That's the description that leaps out from the three-part podcast series on the city of Buffalo from afar. And its headline of the thing is AFAR in capital letters. Afar, a print and digital travel guide that sees itself as reaching conscientious and discerning global travelers. Though all 3 episodes were interesting, easily vaulting past the cliches of what people might assume, the one on food stood out. And not just because it featured the Buffalo News food reporter Francesca Bond. Bond was one of 3 local experts who took podcast host Aislinn Green on a well-targeted tour of Buffalo's food scene. Even within the limited time span of a 20-minute podcast, it became easily clear that Buffalo offers a span of dining options that cities throughout the U.S. would find enviable. The only ingredient that may be missing is awareness of local residents who may not realize the culinary riches located right here in their own backyard. Afar calls Buffalo food scene, quote, grounded in tradition and full of innovation, end quote, and provided many examples of how those attributes work together. That may seem contradictory, but it's possible because of the way Buffalo, a city of immigrants, grew. As new groups of people arrived, they brought their culinary traditions with them. But they also picked up new ones from other cultures and often blended techniques, ingredients, and styles. That's similar to what is happening at Southern Junction on Connecticut Street, a James Beard Award finalist 2 years in a row. A look at Southern Junction's menu reveals its Texas smokehouse with Indian flair mission, with dishes entitled brisket biryani and chamahandi slaw. That's the kind of creativity that has gotten recognition from Food and Wine magazine, Yelp, and Texas Monthly, among other outlets. Local restaurateurs have also made good use of the region's family-run farms, as Waxlight's Jessica Forrester explains during the podcast. As much as possible, Waxlight tries to build its menu around local ingredients. More than anything, though, as Bond stresses, Buffalo's immigrants with historic and recent times have created the exciting broth that makes dining out decisions here a complicated matter. Some of the difficult choices might include Persian kebabs at Main Street's Saffron Kitchen, Egyptian tacos at the West Side Bazaar, or Burmese tea leaf salad at Allentown's Bamboo Ridge. Polish and Italian home cooking, representing people who landed in Buffalo in the late 19th and earliest 20th centuries, is also very well represented, though Italian has, by far, the edge. With all this culinary splendor, is it really necessary to yearn for Michelin stars? Budget-minded residents probably don't need an explanation as to why Visit Buffalo, the local tourism board turned down the opportunity to join Michelin's new Great Lakes region. Just the opportunity to be considered for Michelin stars status would have cost the agency $750,000 over 3 years, with no guarantee that any Buffalo restaurant would be chosen. That's actually the way it should be. Accolades should not be bought, but the cost to be considered is still a heavy lift for a tourism agency that is still assessing the damage caused by the recent drop in Canadian visitors, a longtime mainstay of Western New York's revenue from tourism. As recounted in the Afar podcast, that decision cost Waxlight's Forrester a pang. Michelin's stardom in a restaurant dream, but for now, Visit Buffalo's president and CEO, Patrick Kaler, is right to be careful with his agency's budget. Michelin should be considered when the agency's financial picture warrants it. Bond's words from the Afar podcast emphasize the importance of Buffalo itself, recognizing what it has. As she noted, Buffalo is not a place that is particularly used to getting external validation, so we become somewhat a place where we validate ourselves. There is one other ingredient that should be strengthened. Due to unwarranted federal restrictions, fewer immigrants are able to seek out homes and livelihoods, as well as offer their delicious culinary cuisines in Buffalo. May that be merely a temporary setback.
Well, next we'll stay on the editorial page for the Another Voice column, and today's subject is the social safety net. And the writer is Joseph Schlund of Williamsville, who is a retired IT professional who writes about Social Security and healthcare policy. His headline is, "Fix Medicare Before Planning to Expand It to All." He writes, "Medicare for All keeps returning to the national debate, but we rarely stop to examine the conditions of Medicare as it exists today. The program millions of retirees rely on is fragmented, confusing, administratively bloated, and heading toward insolvency. That is the conclusion of decades of trustees' reports and the daily experience of people trying to navigate Parts A, B, C, and D, supplemental plans, enrollment windows, and relentless marketing that overwhelms people who simply want stable coverage and predictable costs. Medicare has become Medicare for some. It works for people who can decode the maze of options and afford supplemental coverage. It fails people who get lost in the complexity, miss enrollment windows, or watch their Social Security checks shrink from premiums they barely understand. Expanding this system to 330 million people without repairing it will not create Medicare for all. A broken foundation cannot deliver the stability people expect from a federal health program. A program struggling to remain solvent for 65 million retirees cannot suddenly absorb the entire population. Medicare is buckling under administrative waste, duplicate plan infrastructure, and billions spent on marketing. Scale only magnifies these problems, premiums rise, benefits narrow, and coverage becomes harder to navigate. The solution is already inside Medicare. Combine Part A, Part B, Medigap Plan G, and basic dental and vision. That package covers about 99% of retirees' needs. Instead of forcing people to shop among dozens of plans, make this combination the national default at full retirement age. Call it what it should have been all along, Standard Medicare, a unified structure that finally matches what retirees reasonably expect Medicare to be. Standard Medicare would eliminate Parts A, B, C, and D. One unified plan, automatic enrollment, no more premium deductions from Social Security, a simple benefit enhancement credit for retirees who want additional coverage. Streamlining strengthens solvency through simplification, not expansion. Medicare for all only works if Medicare itself works. Fix Medicare for some. build the foundation first. Everything else comes after.
We turn now to our editorial cartoon for today, and it comes from Michael Ramirez of the Creators Syndicate. And it's interesting. It looks at the top of the page, there's a blue, white, and red heading, and it looks like the American flag colors. And to the right of that is the logo superimposed on that says U.S. Department of Homeland Security. And in the blue strip, it says ICE Employee Handbook 2026. In the white strip, it says Remedial Training for Knuckleheads. And in the red strip, it says Chapter 1, Do Not Shoot Unarmed People. And it has two columns underneath that. On the left side, it's in green, and it says Do, and it has check marks there. And the first check mark is Be Polite. The second one, Allow First Amendment rights. Third, never stand in the path of a moving vehicle. Fourth, only shoot with your phone camera. And fifth, take down their license plate number. And underneath that, there's in black a note in red print. It says, you are an immigration enforcement agent, not a SWAT team member or a combat troop. And in the column next to that, in red, it has X marks and says don't. And there's simply no words there. There's just an image of an agent with tattooed arms, wearing a vest, and a face mask. And only his eyes are revealed, and his eyes are bloodshot, and there are no eyeballs, just the whites of his eyes. And he's holding a gun, finger on the trigger, pointing it at us. That's the message for knuckleheads.
There we go. Well, next we're going to turn to the political opinion columns, and our first one comes from Carl P. Lubsdorff, who writes for the Dallas Morning News, and his headline is, Trump is struggling to bring back nuclear curbs on Iran. He says, hardly a day goes by that President Trump doesn't vow to keep Iran from developing a nuclear weapon and denounce the decade-old international agreement that did just that. But there's no sign yet that Trump's 6-month bombardment of Iran will produce a similar new curb on the country's nuclear development. Besides, it has weakened overall U.S. influence in the Middle East by giving the Iranians new leverage over oil traffic through the Strait of Hormuz. Both results illustrate the extent to which Trump's policy towards Iran has backfired, both his 2008 decision withdrawing from the initial agreement curbing its nuclear ambitions and the war that has failed so far to impose a similar curb. Though Trump cited other potential goals like regime change at the outset, the one constant in his rhetoric has been his declaration that, quote, Iran will never have a nuclear weapon, unquote, and his contention it was within a very short time of developing one. Despite the success of the June 2025 U.S. bombing that Trump said had obliterated Iranian nuclear sites, that may well have been true. But if it was because he scrapped the 2016 agreement that could have prevented it. You would never know that from his rhetoric, however. They've rejected every opportunity to renounce their nuclear ambitions, and we can't take it anymore, Trump said in announcing the attacks last February. Instead, they attempted to rebuild their nuclear program and to continue developing the long-range missiles that can now threaten our very good friends and allies in Europe, our troops stationed overseas, and could soon reach the American homeland, he said. Like many Trump statements, that was misleading, if not simply untrue, largely because the threat that he decried would have been less today, not more, had he maintained the 2016 agreement. In fact, in the pact, the officially Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, Iran agreed with the United States, Russia, France, China, Germany, and Great Britain to accept detailed limits on its nuclear facilities, including curbs on its uranium enrichment and nuclear stockpiles. The agreement provided regular international inspection to ensure the Iranians abided by it. Almost immediately, top Republicans condemned the agreement, though it was the first time Iran had agreed to accept international agreement to limit its nuclear development. Trump joined the denunciations and pledged that, if elected, he would withdraw from the deal, and 15 months after becoming president, he fulfilled that pledge. The effect was to loosen international curbs on Iranian development of nuclear technology and facilitate its subsequent nuclear development. Because of his prior pledge, Trump's decision hardly came as a surprise, but there was widespread suspicion that his real reason for abrogating the pact had less to do with Iran or the treaty's provisions than the fact that it was negotiated by his predecessor, Barack Obama. A subsequent leaked memo from the British ambassador to Washington underscored that suspicion. In the memo, published in the Daily Mail, Ambassador Kim Darosh called the decision, quote, an active diplomatic vandalism seeming for ideological and personality reasons because the pact was Obama's deal. I terminated Barack Hussein Obama's Iranian nuclear deal, a disaster, Trump said in a televised speech in April. Obama gave them $1.7 billion in cash, green cash, took it out of the banks from Virginia, D.C., and Maryland, all the cash they had, flew it by airplanes in an attempt to buy their respect and loyalty, but it didn't work. But none of that really matters now. The fact is that Trump withdrew from an international deal that was working and, after 6 months of attacks, is struggling to reimpose nuclear restraints without any signs so far that he will succeed.
You are listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier radio reading service, and the time is 31 minutes after the hour. And our next opinion piece comes to us from Stephen Carter, and the headline is, America's surveillance problem is much bigger than Flock. You are being watched was the tagline that opened every episode of the television series Person of Interest, which ran from 2011 to 2016, and already feels ancient. The conceit of the show was that the good guys, aided by friendly AI, could use information from a sea of cameras and microphones to stop crimes even before they happened. That fictional world comes to mind in light of the controversy surrounding Flock Safety, a company that has installed some 120,000 cameras in cities and towns across the United States. Flock's automatic license plate recognition system identifies passing stock cars and stores their identifying details like the make, the models, a Buffalo Bills or Sabres bumper sticker, a cracked rear window, all those items in a searchable database. The utility to law enforcement is very obvious. But after years of strong growth, the company is facing serious backlash. Dozens of jurisdictions have canceled their contracts with Flock since 2025. Some are angry that Flock has been used for immigration enforcement. Others point to examples of law enforcement officers abusing the system. The ACLU has published a model resolution that city governments can use to end their relationship with Flock. Then there's DFlock, a crowdsourced effort to map the locations of as many license plate readers as possible. Back in February, Amazon publicly canceled a plan to link its Ring cameras with Flock systems. Now, my libertarian heart is always warmed when there are signs, however faint, that the future might contain less surveillance rather than more. And critics of Flock's misuse are right to be alarmed. But Flock is only part of a much bigger problem. The more fundamental mistake was letting surveillance become a ubiquitous part of American life. It's hard to imagine now, but in the 19th century, when cameras were very young, it was considered discourteous to take a person's picture without permission. Now, once we've exited our homes, our images are being recorded constantly. In cities and suburbs and increasingly rural areas, Cameras along the road are an accepted fact of life. And that's a problem. In a democracy, we ought to have the right to not simply privacy, but anonymity, to go through the ordinary occupations of daily life without being tracked or surveyed. It's almost funny to see so many public officials who now profess to having no idea that installing cameras all over their cities and towns would lead to mass surveillance. The cameras are mass surveillance. They capture images, which the AI then helpfully labels, and surprise, surprise, law enforcement suddenly wants to sift through those images. That's the heart of the problem. A traffic camera might seem innocuous, a device to discourage running a red light. A security camera up on the light pole might seem insignificant, a tool for fighting crime. A license plate reader might just be a way of keeping track of cars in case a villain happens to drive along. But combining enough bits of data, and the government can create what the Supreme Court condemned just this past June in its decision restricting the use of geofencing, quote, a virtual panoption with which to scrutinize its citizens' activities, end quote. Privacy advocates are calling for tighter controls before authorities can query Flock's database, perhaps even warrant requirement. Flock itself now audits law enforcement requests, and some of the officers who have been arrested for misusing it were, the company says, caught through its efforts. But no government will ever fully resist the temptation to mine whatever data is gathered. And in the long run, the Fourth Amendment will never keep up with technology. The machine is everywhere. Harold Finch of Person of Interest told his associate John Reese way back in the horse and buggy area of 2011. Watching us with 10,000 eyes, listening with 1,000,000 ears. The capital M referred to a particular AI system which Finch had designed, but the eyes and ears didn't belong to the machine. They were just the background sounds and images that are constantly being recorded. The machine was fiction. The constant watching and listening are real. That's why the true issue isn't just Flock. It isn't ICE or a few bad cops. The problem is the government's growing obsession with keeping a constant eye on those it exists to serve.
Turning back to the front page, the headline is, for 43 North hopefuls, it's one last chance. The number of applications is dropping for the final year of the competition. Startups from around the world have one final chance to be part of the 43 North competition this year in Buffalo, and hundreds of companies have seized that opportunity. Despite applications being down for the 12th and final cohort of the competition that awards 5 $1 million investments, a last chance at the 43 North Prize and all the resources that come with winning have been a driving force behind many of the companies applying, including a fair share of repeat applicants. 43 North says it heard from many founders who prioritized the chance to get critical funding during a difficult time to raise money. The competition will be held in early October, and then 43 North will support one final cohort of winning startups that move to Western New York during 2027. After that, the 43 North Foundation will take the lead on providing the support system to startups in the region. It's a shift that banks on the region's startup ecosystem, almost non-existent when 43 North began, having evolved to the point where the region now has entrepreneurs thinking about starting their own business. 43 North received 670 applicants for the final application cycle, more than 100 fewer than it got last year, and significantly fewer than when were received in 2023 and 2024, when nearly 1,000 applicants came in. 51 applicants are from Western New York, continuing a trend of more local interest in participation. Since the application deadline, 43 North has narrowed the field down to 33 applicants after a reviewing process over the last 2 months that has included initial vetting with the help of external investors and startup professionals and virtual pitches and Q&A evaluation.
In Washington news, GOP pressure builds on president to find a path out of this war with Iran. President Trump is under increasing pressure from members of his party to find a way out of the Iran war. With the midterms on the horizon and Republican voters souring on the conflict he once predicted would last just a handful of weeks. Republicans are airing their frustrations publicly and privately about what they see as muddled messaging coming out of the administration on a conflict that has driven up prices for voters. A growing number of prominent MAGA figures have urged Trump to end the conflict, saying there could be dire political consequences if it continues. Republican strategists have echoed those concerns, saying Iran is a major drag on the party heading into the November elections. Trump has alternated between threats and diplomatic overtures to get the job done, but the war is now approaching 6 months with no end in sight. Election Day is less than 3 months away, and the administration has resorted to insisting the fundamentals of the economy are strong. But the rate of inflation remains higher than it was before the conflict began or Trump took office. It's one of those where there's almost no upside, GOP pollster and Signal founder Brett Buchanan said. The protracted conflict has put GOP lawmakers on the defensive as they spend an extended congressional recess in their districts. Retiring Senator Thom Tillis of North Carolina said anxiety over Iran may mean it's time for some Republican lawmakers to separate from the White House on the war, which has hurt the president's approval rating and threatened the GOP's chances of maintaining control of Congress. If it's unpopular and they feel that way, they should tell their constituents the truth, said Tillis, whose impending departure from Congress has allowed him to break publicly with the Trump administration on several key issues. Lawmakers said the war dominated the conversation when Vice President Vance met privately with Senate Republicans on Capitol Hill before the August recess. John Kennedy of Louisiana told reporters afterwards that Vance and other top administration officials should hold a news conference to explain Trump's rationale for going to war. Kennedy said he worried that the American people are somewhat confused about why we went in and where we are. Trump isn't always disciplined in his messaging, Kennedy said in an earlier appearance on CBS's Face the Nation. He suggested other officials take the lead in explaining what's going on in Iran, why we went in, and why we're still there. Negative public opinion on the conflict is putting Republican members of Congress in an awkward position as they fan out over the August recess, some campaigning for re-election and others supporting colleagues who are on the ballot. Some have expressed nervousness over how they will handle the topic. Internal messaging guidance circulated among the Senate Republican Conference in July acknowledged that high fuel costs, gas is averaging more than $4 a gallon, linked to the war, are a problem. The strategy document urged GOP senators to say they are very concerned about the price of gas and want to make sure that the prices come down. Trump was elected in part on a promise to bring down inflation, which makes the surge in gas prices and its overall effect on inflation a particular concern, GOP pollster Whit Ayers said. What we need is strategic clarity from the White House. Absent that, I think they're going to have to be sympathetic to the fact that, to most people, this is not a popular war, Tillis said. The White House said Trump can both address voters' economic concerns and strengthen national security. While the president ensures that Iran will never possess a nuclear weapon for our national security, the president has been equally focused on unleashing prosperity for working-class Americans, from creating Trump accounts to slashing job-killing regulations and taxes. For the Trump administration, economic prosperity is not possible without national security, and national security is not possible without economic prosperity. Democrats are promising to press the issue on the campaign trail. This election is going to be a referendum on this war that Donald Trump is losing, Senator Chris Murphy of Connecticut said August 9th on NBC's Meet the Press.
Well, we just heard Stephen Carter's commentary on flock cameras, and now Flock Safety says they're tightening privacy and oversight controls for their nationwide network of automated license plate readers. The company announced Thursday that it will recommend that police agencies retain license plate reader data for 7 days, down from 30, while adding tools to restrict data sharing between agencies and detect potentially abusive searches. Flock also plans to require law enforcement users to associate searches with case codes and automatically suspend users whose activity is flagged as abnormal. The changes come amid a growing scrutiny of surveillance network that Flock says has more than 120,000 cameras across 49 states and serves thousands of law enforcement agencies and communities. The cameras photograph passing vehicles and record information including license plates, vehicle characteristics, location, and time. More than 50 agencies or communities have canceled, suspended, or rejected a Flock contract or deactivated cameras since the beginning of 2026, according to DFlock, a grassroots group that tracks license plate reader deployments.
Also in Washington news, Cassidy slams the order on vaccines from Trump. Republican Senator Bill Cassidy, an increasingly sharp critic of President Trump, on Sunday called the president's vaccine order to separate injections for measles, mumps, and rubella wrong on so many levels because, among other things, it would require children to receive more shots. Let's just take it from the perspective of the parent. Cassidy, who's a doctor, who chairs the Senate Committee on Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions, told CNN's State of the Union. Now, instead of going to the doctor twice to get their child vaccinated, they have to go 6 times. Instead of mom and dad missing work twice to take their child to the doctor, they have to miss the work or take vacation or personal sick leave 6 times, he added. This is horribly inconvenient. It's going to contribute to an increased loss of income. The president's proposal is going to end up with more children being sick, Cassidy said. During an appearance on Sunday on ABC News This Week, the Louisiana senator said, "This is why the president's poll numbers are down, because you've lost sight of affordability for the parent. You've lost sight of the convenience for the American family. You've lost sight of that which is driving higher costs up in health care."
Well, normally at this time we look at the day's death listings. However, as seems to be kind of the case here on Mondays, there are no death listings, and so we're going to move on to Georgia Nichols Royal Stars. And if today's your birthday, happy birthday. According to Georgia Nichols, you are persuasive, confident, flamboyant, and generous. You're also strong-willed with firm convictions. This year, you reap the benefits of your hard work. So if today's your birthday, happy birthday. The stars show what kind of a day you're going to have, and 5 stars are a dynamic day, 4 stars are a positive day, 3 stars are an average day, and today everybody is having 3 and 4 star days. We'll start with Aries, who will enjoy a 4-star day. And according to Georgia, you should enjoy schmoozing with everyone. Sports and fun times with kids will appeal. Romantic vibes are strong. Tonight, cooperate and listen to others. For us Tarians, we are going to have a 3-star day. Discussions with an older family member might take place today. The concern could be about practical repairs. And tonight, we are supposed to get better organized. For Gemini, 4-star day. It's a great day for a short trip or a drive. You'll enjoy talking to siblings, relatives, and neighbors. Tonight, Gemini should socialize. For Cancer, 3 stars. You'll enjoy entertaining at home today. In fact, it's the perfect day or evening for a romantic date. And tonight, a warm conversation. For Leo, 4 stars. In the morning, things are a bit laid back, but as the day wears on, your energy will pick up. Enjoy schmoozing with others, and tonight you should check your money scene. For Virgo, 3 stars. You'll enjoy some privacy today, especially because you might be involved in discussions about inheritance, taxes, debt, or shared property. You might want to figure out how to divide something, and tonight you will need patience. For Libra, 4 stars. It's a favorable time for discussions and making plans, but not for agreeing to anything. It's a marvelous day to socialize and explore romantic opportunities, and tonight you are in charge. Scorpio, 3 stars. People will listen to you today. You have some sensible ideas that you want to share, especially related to your job, your health, or even a pet. Tonight, enjoy privacy. Sagittarius, 4 stars. Enjoy the company of friends, especially creative people. You might discuss travel opportunities or issues related to the law, medicine, publishing, or higher education. And the word for tonight is friendships. Capricorn, 3 stars. You make a great impression on others today because others see you as warm-hearted, generous, and attractive. Explore romantic opportunities. Tonight you're noticed. For Aquarius, 4 stars. This is a friendly, sociable day. Enjoy schmoozing with others, especially people from different cultures. Someone older or wiser might have advice for you, and tonight the word is explore. And finally, for Pisces, it's a 3-star day. Discussions about how to share or divide something will favor you today. Meanwhile, this is a friendly, romantic day full of fun possibilities. Tonight, though, check your finances.
And now it's time to take a look back in history to see what kind of important and significant things have happened on August 17th throughout the years. We'll start off in 1807. The first steamboat carrying paying passengers took its first journey from New York City to Albany, New York. Designed by American engineer Robert Fulton, the Clermont made the trip north in 32 hours. In 1859, the U.S. Postal Service debuted airmail by balloon. The craft took off in Lafayette, Indiana, bearing mail for New York City. A lack of wind meant that the balloon could only make 30 miles of the journey, so the mail bag made the rest of the trip by train. In 1862, deprived of land and provisions that were promised by the U.S. government, members of the Dakota tribe raided a Minnesota farm for eggs, killing 5 settlers. Anticipating retaliation, the tribe continued to attack. The federal government quelled the uprising in September. More than 500 white people and about 190 Dakotans died. In 1877, already known as a delinquent and thief, Billy the Kid shot an Arizona blacksmith in a fight over a poker game. The man died the next day, and this is the Kid's first known victim. In 1945, George Orwell published Animal Farm, declaring all animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others. The satire of a communist utopia has become a classic. And finally, in 1978, the first transatlantic balloon flight was successfully completed long after the modality's heyday. And that's what's happening. At least it got farther than 30 miles offshore.
There we go. Well, we'll wrap up with a note that over 100,000 people have lost power in Hawaii. Almost 130,000 utility customers in Hawaii had no power Sunday morning after Hurricane Lala brushed the Big Island before being downgraded to a tropical storm. Hawaiian Electric warned customers that repair efforts were hampered by hurricane-force winds and rain, flooded roadways, and downed trees. Lala's maximum sustained winds of 70 miles an hour remained just below hurricane status, and weather officials continued to warn of life-threatening conditions. As of Sunday, one person was reported dead in a car-related incident, and 2 homes were swept away.
You are listening to a reading of articles from the Buffalo News for Monday, August 17th on your Niagara Frontier radio reading service. And we'll return for some more readings after this short break. Your readers today are
Ed Howard
and Ted Pajacki.
If you're listening to this publication online, you're probably using our website, a podcast player like Spotify or iTunes, a streaming service like Siro, or a smart speaker. Did you know that we now have a dedicated app that can be downloaded to any mobile device, like a smartphone or tablet, for free? App users can conveniently access our live stream and any episode of our podcast easier than ever. To download the app, just type NFRRS in the search window in the Apple App Store or in the Google Play Store. Contact us anytime if you have any questions by calling 716-821-5555, extension 5. Thank you.
we'll continue now with our reading of articles from today's Buffalo News, and your readers today are
Ed Howard
and Ted Pajacki. And we turn now to city and regional news, and longtime radio host Bowerly fired from WBEN AM. And it's noted here, this is about a media personality who's been involved in a number of controversies over the years. WBEN AM talk host Tom Bowerly was fired on Friday, just a week before his contract was set to expire. Bowerly, who's 62, has worked at the conservative talk radio station since 2002 and has been in radio for 45 years, including brief stops in Tampa, Florida, and St. Louis. He declined comment. Presumably, that's because he wants to avoid losing any severance. A spokesperson for Odyssey confirmed Bowerly's departure on Sunday morning with this brief statement. "We thank him for his years of contributions and wish him the best in retirement. Nothing else to share at this time." His firing means he won't get to say goodbye to his audience on the air, something WBEN AM allowed talk show host Sandy Beach to do when he retired in 2021. But in a lengthy email, Bowerly's wife, Rochelle, gave her view of what transpired in the last several months that culminated in a severance call Friday with her husband and one of his attorneys. She said that Bowerly had been assured for months that Odyssey, which owns WBEN, wanted to keep him and had praised him for his work. Originally, Tom wanted to spin it as retirement, but he actually couldn't have lived with himself. So he stopped that charade after a couple of hours because he said his fans and sponsors deserve the truth, wrote Miss Rochelle. For the only time in a 45-year legendary career, he was fired, capital letters. FYI, for your information, Tom has told me he is no different than anyone else who's been screwed in corporate or industry America. She added, he was told in May that he would be offered a new contract in July, but it didn't arrive. He wanted a 5-year deal without a raise. He departed for a station sponsorship trip to Italy this month with some of his listeners and was told not to worry. However, in hindsight, there were reasons to worry, and he was fired right after his return. A year ago, Bowerly's show was cut by an hour to 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. weekdays so the station could give a younger fill-in host, Joe Beamer, a permanent hosting job from 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. Beamer would appear to be the likely replacement for Bowerly, or could at least work a longer shift. Stefan Mihailu, a former WGRZ-TV reporter and former Erie County controller, has filled in for Bowerly recently and could also be a candidate for Bowerly's job. WBEN has stood by Bowerly for years through some headline-grabbing controversies, heart bypass surgery, and a bout with COVID-19. He also has worked remotely from his residences both in Williamsville and in Florida. He was accused in 2024 lawsuit filed in Supreme Court by his siblings Richard Bowerly and Barbara Martucci of taking advantage of his dying mother's state of advanced illness to gain power of attorney from her and cut them out of their portion of her estate. The Buffalo News reported on January 11, 2014, that Amherst police responded to Bowerly's Williamsville home the previous week following his complaints that operatives of Governor Andrew M. Cuomo were surveying him. After Amherst police contacted crisis services about their concerns, the Buffalo News reported Bowerly consented to a voluntary psychiatric evaluation at Erie County Medical Center. 2 years later, Bauerle set the record straight once and for all in an interview with a conservative internet publication called Canada Free Press. And during his afternoon show about his evaluation at ECMC's psychiatric ward, he contended the episode stemmed from graduate university students and people from certain entities conducting invisible surveillance operations in his backyards. He claimed he was confronting them with a loaded gun when Amherst police arrived. Besides those controversies, Bauerle's salary would have been an issue at a time that radio groups are cutting higher paid employees in difficult times for all media. Beyond the brief Odyssey statement from the spokesperson, the company would not address why its long-standing support of Bauerle has ended with his abrupt firing or how he will be replaced.
Well, our next story is headlined "Indictment Dismissed in a $2.3 million tax fraud case due to the suspect's failing health." Federal prosecutors on August 6th dismissed a decade-old $2.3 million 34-count tax fraud indictment against a tax preparer after her lawyer said her life-threatening cancer made her unable to stand trial. With permission from senior U.S. District Judge Richard Arcara, the U.S. Attorney's Office dismissed the charges against Vicky Vanabawathong, a one-time fugitive accused of fraudulently applying education and fuel tax credits to more than 1,000 of her Buffalo clients' U.S. income tax returns. Vanabawathong, 57, underwent chemotherapy and radiation in 2023 to treat stage 4 colon cancer, according to a court filing from Assistant Federal Public Defender Jeffrey Bagley. When Bagley spoke to her several months ago, Vanabawathong told him that her medical team had informed her that her cancer has likely spread once again, this time to her pancreas, he said in a court filing. Bagley described her as bedridden, needing around-the-clock care from family members, making communication with her about her court motions nearly impossible. "I spoke with Ms. Vanabawathong last week and she is in extreme pain," he told the court in March. "She has difficulty sleeping, she cannot walk, and has difficulty conversing with me." A grand jury indicted her in November 2015, charging 1 count of conspiracy to defraud the United States and 32 counts of aiding and assisting in the preparation and presentation of false and fraudulent returns, and 1 count of obstruction of departmental proceedings and arrest warrant set at the time. Vanabawathong operated several tax preparation businesses in the United States, including 2 on Buffalo's west side. An accomplice prepared the tax returns before sending them to her in Texas, and from there, she sent the returns to the IRS, according to a prosecution filing. The education and fuel tax credits were added to their income tax returns without taxpayers' knowledge and without supporting documentation, according to the indictment. The credits increased the amount of the income tax refund claimed by the taxpayers, and Vanabawathong charged a preparation fee of 10% of the refund amount in addition to other fees. So, the larger fund amount received by the taxpayer, the higher the fee charged by Vanabawathong, according to the indictment.
Our next headline is Chautauqua Vets Charity accused of bilking its donors. A new lawsuit filed by State Attorney General's office accuses the operators of a Chautauqua County Veterans Charity of defrauding their donors and using the organization's revenue for their own benefit. The Office of Attorney General Letitia James sued Healing for Heroes, a disabled veterans retreat, and Wooded Oasis Incorporated last week in the state Supreme Court. The nonprofit organization owns a 30-acre property in Bemis Point, billed as a retreat for disabled veterans. However, the Attorney General's office contends Healing for Heroes has hosted only 4 retreats since 2024, and all of those were for board members and their close associates. The organization rented out the property on Airbnb more than 30 times in 2024 and 25, with board president Thomas Nelson and his wife, the board secretary and treasurer, keeping this $33,000 in rental income the Attorney General's office claims. And according to James, about half of the $93,000 raised from donors went towards property improvements and maintenance and toward board members' expenses such as meals and gasoline. Healing for Heroes exploited veteran service and betrayed the trust of their donors, including local community members, veterans organizations, and businesses to enrich themselves and their friends, James said in a statement. James's office is seeking a court order granting permission to dissolve Healing for Heroes and to redistribute the nonprofit's assets to organizations that better serve disabled veterans. The Buffalo News on Friday sent a message to the organization's Facebook page but did not receive an immediate response. Nelson founded Healing for Heroes in 2024. He previously described himself as a disabled veteran who saw combat while serving with the Marines. He said he found comfort in the natural world and wanted to share the benefits of his experiences in the outdoors with other disabled veterans. Our mission is simple, he said, to offer a safe, welcoming place where service members and their families can relax, rebuild, and find renewed purpose through nature and camaraderie. However, according to the Attorney General's office, the nonprofit has hosted only 4 events since it was started by Nelson, all of which served only board members, their families, and their friends, essentially using the charity to fund their own vacations, the Attorney General's office stated.
Well, Ted, our next story here asks, what's in a name? The Lower West Side, to this activist and publisher, it's welcome to Louisa.
Yeah.
Look at a map of Buffalo and you see a patchwork of neighborhoods and regions whose names suggest their location. North Buffalo, South Buffalo, the East Side, and the West Side. Those who live in the lower left quadrant of a typical city map call their part of the city the Lower West Side, a neighborhood shaped by generations of cultural and ethnic diversity with a mix of languages, traditions, and communities. Now, a community activist and poet is proposing another name for it, one that he hopes will someday become as familiar as the geographic shorthand Buffalo residents have long used for other parts of the city. You should still feel free to call it the Lower West Side, Alberto O. Capa says, but you might also consider referring to the area as Louisa. Using Spanish rules of pronunciation, one would say Loaiza. Loaiza. The Spanish-inspired nickname is intended to, quote, honor and uplift the identity of the Lower West Side, said Capas, publisher of Buffalo Latino Village, a bilingual monthly digital and print publication he founded in 2017. The name reflects the community's heritage, vibrancy, and long-standing contributions to Buffalo's cultural landscape, said Capas, who added that he's working on a concept of an economic development plan that will have an arts and cultural platform. The word itself is Capas' invention, with no meaning in Spanish. Capas coined it by compressing Lower West Side into a single Spanish language inspired of the long-standing English name. Capas said Buffalo Latino Village, which claims a combined print and digital circulation of about 50,000, will begin using Loaiza in its publications on social media and in community outreach. He's also encouraging local groups, cultural institutions, youth programs, and neighborhood organizations to adopt the name as a symbol of unity and cultural recognition. The bottom line is, I want it to be the heartbeat of Buffalo's Lower West Side, to honor our culture, our language, our music, our history, our families, and our businesses that shape Niagara Street, Capa said. As Capa defines it, Loaiza encompasses Niagara Street from Niagara Square to Porter Avenue, the same stretch of roadway that the city officially designated as Avenida San Juan more than a decade ago. As part of the city's Hispanic Heritage District, the Avenida has murals and history markers, gateway arches, and wayfinding signs that honor Buffalo's Hispanic community and national Hispanic leaders. It is also the official route for the annual Puerto Rican and Hispanic Day Parade of Western New York.
You are listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier radio reading service. And the time is 15 minutes after the hour. And even though it was on Saturday and it's preseason, we'll call today Victory Monday.
Yes, we will.
And here we go. We got several articles about the Bills in here, so we're going to give you a couple of the key ones. It's only preseason, but Allen remains the Bills' star of starters. Josh Allen looked right at home in his new digs on Saturday. The Buffalo Bills starting quarterback directed 2 drives that ended in points in the team's preseason opener against the Carolina Panthers, a 29-14 victory in the first ever exhibition game at the new Highmark Stadium. And on a personal note, I was lucky to have a friend, Roy, who invited me to join him for the game, and it's an amazing location there, that stadium. With Allen under center, the offense ran 14 plays, gained 124 yards, and produced 8 first downs. Allen went 6 of 8 for 111 yards and 1 touchdown, compiling a passing rate of 156.2 and leading the team to 10 points. I thought we executed well today. Some things to clean up, just like anything else, but it was good to see our guys make some good plays today, Allen said after the game. For the first time in his career, Allen did not take a step during the 2025 preseason, but was on board with the change in plans implemented by new head coach Joe Brady, who wanted every healthy player available Saturday. Real life game reps, albeit preseason, it's still reps, Allen said. The offense started fast as Allen completed a 21-yard pass to Khalil Shakir on the first play from scrimmage, and then a 32-yard pass to DJ Moore 2 plays later. The drive stalled when Allen was sacked for an 8-yard loss, and the offense settled for a 33-yard field goal by Tyler Bass to open the scoring. The Bills' second offensive drive was kept alive by a face mask penalty against Carolina's Trevis Gipson Sr. that erased his 3rd down sack of Allen. The Bills took advantage with an 18-yard completion to Moore, followed by a 9-yard touchdown pass to Keon Coleman. I want to score touchdowns every time we get the ball, right? I felt like us being able to sustain the discipline that's going to take to drive the ball and finish. In the first drive, I thought we had some chunk plays, but then we stalled. But we got some points on the board, Brady said. The second drive, we had a couple of penalties. We got bailed out on one, but look, we got the ball back and we were able to score a touchdown. If there was a negative for the Bills, it's that Allen was sacked once and hit a couple of other times, which is a scary sight in the preseason. I thought he took some hits that I actually don't like, Brady said of Allen, but I think it was actually good for him to kind of feel some of that. I was pleased with how the guys played. It was good to get DJ and Khalil involved and for a lot of us to clean up. It remains to be seen if the Bills will play Allen more in the preseason. The team has a joint practice with the Cleveland Browns on Thursday ahead of their second exhibition game. My heart skips a beat every time he gets touched throughout for the next 20 games. But that's the price you pay for playing football, Brady said of Allen taking hits. What I did not want is anybody to step out there today and feel like I'm playing 3 drives or I'm going to play 10 plays. I wanted them waking up with the mindset that they're going to be playing 70. And so if you dip your toe in, that's when injuries happen. So I'm yelling at him to get rid of some of that football. But look, that's the way he plays football. And I don't want to take that out of him too. Josh Allen was replaced by Kyle Allen at the start of the Bills' third offensive drive. And here are some additional observations. First, the starting D saw extended action. If this is a sign of things to come in the Bills' new 3-4 defense under coordinator Jim Leonhard, there is a lot for which to be excited. The starting defense gave up a total of 14 yards on the Panthers' first two possessions, forcing a 3-and-out on each. The Panthers thought they had achieved the first down with 12:16 remaining in the second quarter, but a 9-yard completion was wiped out by a penalty. On 3rd and 6, Panthers quarterback Bryce Young was sacked by Bills defensive tackle Deion Walker to force a third straight 3-and-out. Defense coming out with 3 straight 3-and-outs was a lot of fun to see, Brady said. The defense was without projected starting safeties Cole Bishop and C.J. Gardner-Johnson because of injury, as well as projected starting cornerback Maxwell Harrison. Brady said the Bills decided to pull most of the defensive starters. They're just getting pushback because the players wanted to keep going. I wanted us to be able to, can we master the basics? Can we play our base, our day, one install, and just do it to a higher level? There's already enough emotions of a first preseason game and everybody flying around, Brady say. If we try to do too much, we'll slow them down. We have a lot of volume in our defense and in the playbook, but when we get to the games, let's just see what they can do. It was cool to see the starters coming off, and I'm pulling them, and they want to keep going. Second, Moore gave the Bills a scare. The team's projected number 1 receiver got off to a hot start, catching a 32-yarder from Allen on the third play from scrimmage. Moore later made 2 more catches, giving him 61 yards after his final reception, which gained 18 yards and advanced the ball to the Panthers' 9-yard line. Moore came up hobbling. He went to the sideline, talked with the trainers before taking a seat on the bench. Trainers continued to look at Moore's right foot or ankle, and he ultimately did not return to the game, although Brady confirmed he was going to be done with the rest of the offensive starters anyway. Moore told Brady during the game that he was good to go. I thought he had a good day, so we're going to continue to grow on that, Josh Allen said. He's a heck of a football player, and we're lucky to have him. Moore also made a strong impression on his teammates. Some of those plays today, they were amazing, Shakir said of Moore. I think they had one on the sideline, DJ running an out route. Absolutely insane ball by Josh, and then DJ to catch and get the first down. The awareness to do that is amazing. Just ball players, man, like true ball players. It's like football art, right? It was beautiful.
Well, we'll continue on with the Bills and Catherine Fitzgerald's column, which is headlined First Class Action Figures. Catching Panthers quarterback Young brings a smile to the face of defensive lineman Walker. Buffalo Bills defensive lineman Deion Walker thought he had Carolina Panthers quarterback Bryce Young. Then Walker wasn't sure. Then Walker was grinning as he made the play happen. He pump faked the ball once when I came around, Walker said. I wrapped around it, then he pump faked the ball, and I think that's why I was smiling. When he broke it back down, I was happy. In the Bills' 29-14 win over the Panthers in the first week of the preseason, Walker, even in limited reps, was a game changer. The second-year defender finished with 3 tackles, 1 for loss, a sack, and a pressure. The 6-yard sack brought up a 4th and 12, forcing the Panthers to punt on their 3rd consecutive 3-and-out to start the game, and the sack helped Walker reach an important benchmark. It's always important to get a sack before Ed Oliver. Just throwing that out there, Walker said with a laugh, but it did show me that my hard work is paying off and seeing it come to life. Walker played in all 17 games last season as a rookie, earning all rookie team honors with 39 tackles, 8 for loss, and 1 sack. At the time, Joe Brady was tending to the offensive side of the ball as coordinator, but even before he became the Bills' head coach, Brady's eyes were on Walker as well. I felt like he was an emerging stud last year. Going back and obviously watching the tape with it, Brady said, he's so mature, his size and his length and his versatility up front, and in a limited role today, you felt him out on the football field. What that does for Ed Oliver, what that does for the other guys, that's Huge. Like I say all the time, we got to be able to stop the run, and a guy with his size and length and the versatility with it helps that.
And in NASCAR news from the weekend, Logano strikes it rich in Richmond. The three-time Cup Series champ outduels Briscoe for the victory. Less than a month ago, Joey Logano seemed to be out of the mix for the postseason chase. Then he won at North Wilkesboro, finished third at the Brickyard, and had a top 15 finish last weekend at Iowa, pushing him up to 13th place, 3 spots inside the cut line with 3 races to go. Then, this weekend, the NASCAR Cup Series returned to one of Logano's favorite tracks, Richmond Raceway, where he had an average finish of 7.2 and 2 victories. Logano showed everyone why he loves Richmond, as he proved to be a master of the track all night. The 3-time Cup Series champion outdueled Chase Briscoe and took the checkered flag for the second time this season, pulling his number 22 Team Penske Ford into victory lane on Saturday night at the Cookout 400. Briscoe trailed Logano by just 2.8 seconds with 2 laps to go as they encountered lapped traffic. But his Toyota couldn't quite catch Logano's Ford for the pass. With the victory, Logano moved up 4 spots in the point standings to 9th place. Those are the races that are really fun to be part of, and the purest NASCAR fans will absolutely love something like that, Logano said. We have a legit shot at winning this championship now. We're getting hot at the right time. I wish we were a little better off in the points than we are, but we're getting there. The win marked Logano's 3rd at Richmond and the 39th in his Cup Series career, moving him into a tie with Hall of Famers Tim Flock and Matt Kenseth for 21st all-time. Logano's Penske teammate, Austin Cindric, finished 3rd, followed by Denny Hamlin, Chase Elliott, Kyle Larson, Christopher Bell, Josh Berry, William Byron, and Alex Bowman. Briscoe, Elliott, and Bell all clinched spots in the chase with their results. For Larson, the 6th place result was his first top 10 finish since June 28th, when he placed 4th at Sonoma. The reigning Cup Series champion pitted for fresh tires late in Stage 2 and raced to the front on the back 9 to lead the lap for the start of the final stage.
Well, in baseball news, Paul Skenes' next start has been pushed back. Velocity is down for the struggling Pirates ace, and his ERA is going up. The Pittsburgh Pirates have pushed back Paul Skenes' next start. He's now scheduled to pitch against the Detroit Tigers on Wednesday in the series finale of the team's 3-game set at PNC Park. Pittsburgh manager Don Kelly made the announcement on Saturday. Skenes has struggled for much of this season, and lately he's seen a significant drop in velocity. His regular turn in the rotation would have been yesterday. If he pitches on Wednesday, he'll be on 7 days of rest. It certainly can't hurt in terms of recovery, and you add recovery in for anybody, and that's going to help, Skenes told reporters on Saturday. So, kind of wish it weren't the case, not starting on Sunday, because that's something I pride myself on, but in the long run, it's definitely best to just get some recovery time. Skenes added, ultimately it was Donnie's decision. I don't necessarily disagree with the decision either. The 24-year-old Skenes is 9-11 with a 3.88 ERA this season after winning the National League Rookie of the Year award in 2024 and the National League Cy Young award in 2025, but he has regressed this season. Skenes' ERA had a 1.98 ERA through this stat on May 12th. In 16 starts since then, he's posted an ERA of 5. He allowed 2 runs on 5 hits over 5 innings the last time out on August 11th, but he struck out only 4 batters, and the right-hander was pulled after 65 pitches, stirring concern among the Pirates fans. Skenes' fastball velocity is down from 2025, with his four-seam fastball averaging 96.8 miles an hour, down from 98.2. And in a couple other notes, Alex Cora has turned down an offer to become the manager of Philadelphia, and he had turned it down in April. But if interim manager Don Mattingly does not guide the team to at least a World Series berth, Cora will likely be the team's next skipper, according to a USA Today report. The 50-year-old Cora was fired as manager of the Boston Red Sox on April 25th. And here's an interesting note. The National League is 150 years old, having been founded in 1876. But yet there's still something new under the sun. Here's Joshua Baez, who hit 3 home runs in his Major League debut for the Cardinals on Sunday. Not just that he hit 3 home runs, but he hit them in his first 3 appearances at the plate. Now, there's been at least one rookie with a 3-homer game in each of the last 6 seasons, but what's unique about this is the first 3 times he came to bat, Joshua Baez hit a home run.
Wow. You are listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier radio reading service, and the time is 30 minutes after the hour. Now we turn to some advice from Eric. Headline is, New Flames local fame puts a strain on the relationship. Dear Eric, I've recently started a new relationship with a man who has a very public job in our town. I'm more introverted naturally, and I found it really taxing to always be out and about, watching him schmooze with people as I slip into the wallpaper. Before we get more serious, I'm considering breaking it off. I'm not sure I have it in me to be a local celebrity. Am I moving too fast? And it signed Local Unknown. And Eric replies, Dear Local, one thing you didn't mention is whether you enjoy being with him when you're not in the public eye. If you do, you may want to hold off on ending things and instead talk to him about how your relationship works, what you'd like, and what his expectations might be. He may not be looking for a local celebrity as a partner. He may not need or want you to schmooze with him. He may have insights into negotiating the public eye that will help you both. It's possible that his ideal relationship matches up with your ideal relationship. Talking about what you're experiencing will provide clarity and strengthen your relationship. The next letter. Dear Eric, we have friends who have an adult child who is divorced. This child is on a disability, but is able to do strenuous work at home. Getting together becomes a hate festival toward his child's ex-spouse. When this ex-spouse almost died from an accident, there was no sign of sympathy. In fact, I felt our friends wished this person was dead. I asked, why such hatred? And the answer was, because this ex hurt the family. When these people get the 2 grandchildren for a week in the summer, all we hear is complaints, blaming the ex for everything they think these kids don't know or do wrong. They think it's up to them as grandparents to correct the children on all things. We know the kids. They're nice. They are 11 and 9. You can't say or question anything because it always jumps to how horrible a parent the ex is. When we get together with other people, everyone gets sick of hearing about how perfect these 2 think they are. No one does anything as good as they do. We're sick of the bashing of the ex-spouse and the kids. Don't people like this realize they make themselves look bad? It's not fun anymore. They have become insufferable. Is it wrong to back away from this friendship? And it's signed, Backing Away. And Eric replies, Dear Backing Away, while divorce often has reverberations throughout a family system, sometimes with hard feelings attached, it seems your friends are stuck in a rut that won't help them, their child, or the grandchildren. They may harbor ill will toward the ex, and the ex may or may not be deserving of it. But for their own mental well-being, they have to find a way to process it and move on. Failing to do so will only make them feel worse. You can, as their friends, point this out. It sounds like you've already tried, but they have to be the ones to want to change. If your feelings about them have soured because of the way they talk about the ex, it makes sense to back away. Before you do, you may want to point out that the talk about the ex has consumed your friendship with them and ask them to change the subject. They may be able to honor this request, but if they can't, the next best thing may be to go your separate ways. Next letter to Eric. I just read the letter from a state division who was considering leaving money to some nieces and nephews, but not all of them. One thing you said really struck home with me. Quote, think about what you want your money to accomplish after you're gone. End quote. There are emotional ramifications as well as financial ones when leaving money to relatives. My aunt had no children, but she had 9 nieces and nephews. She chose to leave different amounts to different people according to a ranking system known only to her. She also left a few out of the will entirely, which left hurt feelings. Those of us who received more than others were embarrassed and unsure what to do. We all get along, and we decided not to let it change our relationships. But I know there is some resentment under the surface. Unfortunately, that has become my aunt's legacy. I hope that estate division will take your advice about her will so that it doesn't leave lasting questions and hurt feelings after she has gone. And it's signed, Divided Estate. And Eric replies, Dear Estate, thank you for sharing your perspective. And I'm sorry that your family had to experience this confusion and hurt. Hopefully, in time, you're able to separate your aunt's life from what she left behind.
Well, our next story is headlined Enduring Symbol. Road trip memories, movies, fuel nostalgia for the station wagon. My earliest memory is sitting on the front bench seat of my parents' Pinehurst Green 1972 Oldsmobile Vista Cruiser wagon. A typical American family, we went on to own a Chevy Blazer and a 1980 Oldsmobile Cutlass diesel wagon, wood grain and all. It's no surprise that these vehicles became enduring American icons, says Richard Rete, author of the memoir, Don't Make Me Pull Over, an informal history of the family road trip. They could accommodate large families with rows of bench seats, including those great rear-facing pop-up seats. So many of us have fond memories of the road trips we took in them with our parents and siblings. Yet their genesis took decades to be stitched into our national psyche. They started out as cargo haulers for transporting passengers to train stations, Rate says. In the 1920s and 1930s, they transformed into estate cars with beautifully crafted wood bodies. In the 1960s, they became the beloved Woodies enlisted by surfers. And finally, in the 1970s, they served as the trusted four-wheeled trams that ferried families across America. He fondly remembers his family's 1972 Ford Country Squire wagon with its simulated wood grain body sides, rear-facing third row, and magic door tailgate that folded down for picnics. Chevrolet's downsized 1977 Caprice Classic won Motor Trend Car of the Year, and in 1983, one replaced my family's Cutlass. I may have been bobbing in that Chevy when I first saw photos of the 1986 Ford Taurus wagon's sleek aerodynamics. One was memorably launched into a tree farm in 1989's National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation. Minutes later, it hauled Evergreen Bounty on its roof. About then, Subaru borrowed a page from the AMC Eagle, jacked its legacy wagon, and hired Paul Hogan of Crocodile Dundee fame as its pitchman. The Outback virtually created crossovers, and Volvo, whose station wagons inspired fervent dedication for decades, introduced the notion that the humble family vehicle could achieve sports car performance. A memorable late 1980s print ad posed its turbo wagon next to a Lamborghini towing a trailer. Alas, Volkswagen killed its remaining long backs. However, CEO Hakan Samuelson recently said, probably the U.S. consumers know better, but I think we believe that the market may have gone a bit too far into a single SUV market. I don't think about 10 years from now, we will only have SUVs from Volvo. The immediate outlook for wagons is bleak, said Ivan Drury, Director of Insights at Edmunds. While the wagon was once seen as a point A to point B transportation with emphasis on practicality, the last iterations have been topically more focused on performance. Even in the 1970s, cool dads could own a Chevrolet Kingswood Estate with a 454 V8. By the 1980s, Mercedes-AMG Hamburg were eating Ferraris, but true wagon debauchery began with the 2006 Dodge Magnum SRT8's 425 horsepower Hemi V8. I'll tell you, I remember in 1965 driving across the country from New York to California in a 1965 Dodge Polara wagon.
All right. Well, as the summer winds down here and people do their vacation plans and county and state fairs, we've got an article here for your amusement, and it's a look at behind the scenes with fan favorite whirling, plunging carnival rides. Carnival operators look at rides a little differently from the rest of us. For the public, the question is, which one do we go on first? For the professionals, the question is, which one is the biggest pain to transport and assemble? It's a tough industry, said Ron Gustafson, an amusement industry historian and author, and former Hall of Fame chairman of the International Association of Amusement Parks and Attractions. These rides aren't cheap, he said. There's maintenance, upkeep, employees, cost of fuel, insurance, fees, and there's also the cost of time. It's 60 to 80 hours a week in season, he said. It's not for everyone. The people who get into this business do it because they love it, because the public loves it. There's nothing like going to an amusement park or a fair, Gustafson said. The smells, the noises, the screams of the kids on the rides, the getting a little sunburn and having fun. I don't think that'll ever change. Neither do the rides. The same ones tend to appear over and over at county fairs and carnivals, not to mention boardwalks and amusement parks. Here are some of the favorites and what the professionals think of them. The first one is the Himalaya. This ride, which courses over an undulating track, dates back to the 1950s, but its origin is older. Switchbacks and scenic railways were a feature of British fairgrounds in the early 1900s. A closer ancestor was the Caterpillar, introduced in 1922. A canvas canopy descended on the cars. When it came up at the end of the ride, couples could be discovered smooching. In the 1920s, this was considered hilarious. There's still one operating in Salem, New Hampshire, Gustafson said. The Himalaya, made by Wisdom Rides, also resembles several other attractions, including Music Express with variations, and the Flying Bobs and the Thunderbolt. The public may barely notice the difference. Show people have to look at the logistics and the cost of moving equipment, especially with the cost of fuel being at $5 a gallon, Gustafson said. The Himalaya and Music Express are one trailer. The Bobs are two trailer rides. The hit in 2000 Himalaya ride is one of the largest road models that's traveling throughout the United States. And then there's the Pirate Ship. This pendulum-like swinging ride, variations made by Chance, Huss, and Zamperia Incorporated. It's an Italian company with offices in Boontown, New Jersey. It's more complicated than it looks. It's kind of a sophisticated mechanism, he said. For the ship to get its full height, that takes propulsion. The motor pushes the ship forward. Then there's a sensor. When the ship passes the sensor, it tells the motor to change direction. You don't want the ride to go above the tower. Some versions, like Chance's and Zampeira's, are one-truck rides. The Huss version, introduced in 1978, requires 3 trucks. Then there's the Wave Swinger. This ride's ancestor is the Traverse Circle Swing, introduced in 1904 in Coney Island's Luma Park and other places. Other versions were called the Charoplane or the Yo-Yo. It's a revolving ride with seats suspended from chains, which swing out when the machine picks up speed. The Wave Swinger, made by the German company Zierer, was introduced in 1972, and it added an additional thrill. As the ride accelerates, it also oscillates. The original Zierer version takes 2 trailers to move, but other companies make smaller units. There are quite a few in the U.S., Gustafson said. The Europeans have also embraced the smaller versions. And the old traditional Ferris wheel. Pleasure wheels were seen in fairgrounds going back to the 18th century, but engineer George Washington Gale Ferris Jr. built a bigger one, the original giant 264-foot-high wheel for the 1893 World's Columbian Exposition in Chicago. The name eventually became generic. Lots of companies make Ferris wheels. The Eli Bridge Company out of Jacksonville was building them since 1900. The biggest ones, they take as many as 9 trucks to transport, dominate a skyline, and announce to the world that the fair is in town. More typical are smaller ones, 3 and 2 and even 1 trailer jobs. And finally, dark rides. Dark rides are known as ghost trains in Britain. They feature ghost skeletons and other mechanical frights that pop out of walls and drop from the ceiling. They're called pretzel rides because of the winding, pretzel-like tracks along which the cars meander. The first ones were built in 1928 by the Pretzel Amusement Ride Company of Bridgeton, New Jersey. They take 1 or 2 trailers, Gustafson said. They're not as large as the permanent installations in a park, but even though it's not a big, long ride, people love the thrill of the tricks, as we call them. The ghosts jumping out, the things that are triggered electrically as you go through, brings the scares and the blood pressure up in the people.
Ooh. Our next story is headlined Porcelain Phoenix. A California artist rebuilds from the ashes after the Eaton fire destroyed her home and studio. No, 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 Chelsea Bayouth remembers saying as she returned to her Altadena home on January 11, 2025. Flames still burned from the Eaton fire, which forced her to evacuate a few nights earlier with her husband, 3-year-old daughter, and 19-year-old neighbor. Nothing remained except for pieces of her porcelain ceramics. It was like going to the morgue to identify a body, said Bayouth, age 40. It was the worst day. Her home and the accessory dwelling unit that housed her art studio, containing fabrication supplies, paintings, and a floor-to-ceiling bookshelf of sketchbooks and journals she'd kept since childhood, were transformed into mountains of floaty ash, Bayouth said. She remembers scooping up what remained of her artwork and watching it sift through her fingers, the porcelain broken and changed. They had pieces of my studio fused to them, iron, glass, literally anything around it that melted and could not turn to ash got stuck to them, Bayouth said. She'd only started working with high-fire porcelain 5 months before the fire. She didn't realize at the time that porcelain, which is fired at more than 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit in the kiln, is almost indestructible by heat. Since the fire, Much of Bayouth's art centers on grief, the grief of motherhood, existing, or a home destroyed, she said. Bayouth and her family now live in Silver Lake, a freelance puppet builder supporting the film and television industry. She's worked on projects ranging from Robot Chicken, stop-motion productions for which she won an Emmy in 2016, to Olivia Rodrigo's recent music video, The Cure. She's also a poet with work featured in various online literary magazines and has a manuscript she's trying to publish. Bayouth continues to make sculptures, and she sells them online and at art markets through her brand Seabay Ceramics. Prices range from $45 to $400, depending on the size and how much 18-karat gold is used for the piece. In her studio, surrounded by shelves of porcelain figures, recovered from Altadena and refired, she fashions whimsical sculptures imitating feminine figures and feline forms, which are the same, she said, laughing. Those two energies are very similar. Most are small enough to fit into the palm of her hand. On some pieces she writes poetry, and on others, handwritten spells manifesting joy or health dance across the white surface.
We turn now to the My View column, and today's was written by Torin Myers, who's a student at Hilbert College and had an unusual catch while fishing. And the title of this little essay is Sharks Are Beautiful and Getting Rarer. About 2 years ago, I went on a hot, sunny vacation to Hilton Head Island, South Carolina. Since this is an island, many people do ocean-related activities such as fishing, going to the beach, or kayaking. One day, my family and I decided to go fishing in some brackish water where fresh water and salt water meet. The plan was to catch some fish for dinner. Our guide took us some 28 miles out. I remember it being nice and sunny. We put a couple of lines out and waited. My brother caught the first fish, but it fell off. But then my dad's line started pulling. When it broke the surface, it was not what we were expecting. The prime catches in these waters include tarpon, Spanish mackerel, and bluefish. This was a hammerhead shark. Since it was a shark, the guide very carefully took the hook out of its mouth. But a fact about hammerheads, they get confused after being out of the water, and the guide had to hold him in the water a little bit until he was able to swim away safely. It was one of the coolest things ever as a shark lover that I've ever seen. After a little while, my mom's line began moving, and she began reeling it in. Whatever was on the end of this was definitely big. As it got closer to the surface, she saw a fin and gave it to my dad. She did not want to reel that thing in. I couldn't remember what type of shark that was, but it had spots and was very calm. We were able to bring it into the boat and get the hook out of it easily. I got to pet it too. It was funny that we caught 2 in a row, and so we decided to move the boat since we were clearly in a spot with a lot of shark activity. Once we moved, we put our lines back in. We waited about 30 minutes, and this time my brother's line and my line went off at the same time. In the end, our lines were tangled with the same fish, another shark, this time an adolescent hammerhead. For me, this was a dream. We had to cut my line and bring it on board with my brother's pole. We both got to hold it and take a picture. I yapped about shark facts, and this time I was the person to release the shark. We decided to go a few more rounds since my mom was tired of sharks and actually wanted some kind of edible fish. We put our lines back in, and my line started going off, and the line was pulling very fast, and the rod was bending. It took me and my brother to reel in what was a small bull shark. This I did not pet. This we did not bring on board. It was too dangerous even to get the hook out of it, even though he was small. We cut as much of the line off as we could and were able to let the shark go. The last shark I caught was a baby blacktip reef shark. He was very cute and tiny. I was able to hold him with both of my hands. Finally, it was time to go back. It had been an amazing experience for me. But sadly, when people hear the word shark, they probably only think of the fatalities or the attacks that very rarely happen. In all actuality, these are beautiful creatures, and many are in danger of extinction. Human activity has caused most of this danger, with more than 30% of all shark species now under threat. That cool experience I had with these amazing creatures could be the last time I ever see one alive.
You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the Buffalo News for Monday, August 17th. We read the Buffalo News live on weekday and Sunday mornings at 9 a.m. and rebroadcast at 4 p.m. For more information, call 716-821-5555. Your readers today have been
Ted Pajacki
and Ed Howard, and we thank you for listening.
If you or people you know shop at any of the Dash's supermarkets, please save Dash's register tapes for radio reading. Our agency receives $2 for every $100 in Dash's register tapes. Radio reading has raised thousands of dollars so far. Anyone can drop off their Dash's tapes to the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service at 1199 Harlem Road, Cheektowaga, between William and Clinton Streets. Or Dash's tapes can be mailed to the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service at 1199 Harlem Road, Cheektowaga, New York, 14227. Any questions on Dash's tapes for radio reading? Call us at 716-821-5555, and thanks for caring. following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision, or have another print disability,